Case 1. John Bridges, 1991. He was performing a routine inspection on a Boeing 737 at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport when the unthinkable happened. The pilot, following standard procedure, throttled up the left engine to taxi power. John was standing 9 feet from the intake, 3 feet inside what engineers call the kill zone. At 30,000 pounds of suction force, John's body was pulled off the ground and hurled directly into the spinning fan blades. But John Bridges didn't die. His helmet, a standard issue hard hat, jammed between the fan blades, creating just enough resistance to slow the engine. The pilot felt the vibration and immediately cut power. John was extracted with a fractured skull, broken ribs, and severe lacerations. But he was alive. So here's the question. This video will answer. Why did John Bridges survive when 6 others in this video didn't? The answer isn't luck, it's physics. And for some of these victims, the physics was so fast that their brains never even registered what was happening. Zero awareness, zero pain. Just gone. For others, they had seconds. Seconds to see the blades. Seconds to know there was no escape. But John was lucky. He had a helmet and physics on his side. Most people don't get a second chance. Case 2. Courtney Edwards. Courtney Edwards. January 28, 2022. Montgomery, Alabama. Courtney was a 34-year-old ground crew member at Dannelly Field, a regional airport serving commercial and military flights. That morning, an Embraer 170 regional jet had just landed and was taxiing to the gate. Courtney was part of the marshalling team, guiding the aircraft into position. Standard procedure. She'd done it hundreds of times, but this time, something went wrong. Investigators believe Courtney stepped too close to the left engine while it was still running at idle. Now, here's what most people don't understand about jet engines. Even at idle power, a jet engine creates a low-pressure zone directly in front of the intake. This zone acts like an invisible funnel, pulling air, and anything else, toward the spinning fan blades. The boundary of this zone is called the ingestion radius. For the Embraer's CF-34 engine, that radius extends approximately 6 feet from the intake at idle. Courtney was standing inside that radius. At 14,500 pounds of thrust, the pressure differential was enough to overcome her body weight. She was lifted off the ground and pulled directly into the engine. The autopsy classified her death as instantaneous blunt force trauma. Did Courtney have time to realize what was happening? About 0.3 seconds? Not enough time to scream? Not enough time to reach out? Barely enough time for her brain to register that something was wrong. At least Courtney's death was fast. For Ravi Subramanian, it wasn't. Case 3. Ravi Subramanian. December 7th, 2015. Mumbai, India. Ravi was a 32-year-old aircraft maintenance engineer at Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport, working the night shift on an Air India Airbus A319. The aircraft had just completed scheduled maintenance, and Ravi's team was performing final checks before releasing it for service. At 2:47 a.m., the flight crew began engine startup procedures. But there was a miscommunication. Ravi was still near the left engine, conducting a visual inspection of the nacelle. The crew, seated in the cockpit 80 feet forward, had no direct line of sight to his position. The standard protocol requires ground crew to signal "all clear" before engine start. That signal was never given or never received. When a jet engine starts, it doesn't gradually spin up. It reaches what's called breakaway thrust within seconds, the minimum power needed to begin taxiing. For the CFM56-5B engine on the A319, breakaway thrust is approximately 7,000 pounds of force. Ravi was standing 8 feet from the intake when the engine spooled up. The ingestion radius expanded from 3 feet to 12 feet in under 2 seconds. Ravi's body was found inside the engine core. Did Ravi have time to realize what was happening? About 1 full second. 1 second to feel the pull. 1 second to see the blades accelerating. 1 second to know there was no way out. At least Ravi's death was an accident. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Efinger? He walked straight into it. Case 4. Efinger, Kyler Efinger. December 31st, 2024. Honolulu, Hawaii. Kyler was a 25-year-old contract worker at Daniel K. Inouye International Airport. His job, cleaning the exterior of aircraft between flights. On New Year's Eve, Kyler was assigned to a United Airlines Boeing 777 that had just arrived from Los Angeles. The Boeing 777 is powered by GE90 engines, the largest jet engines ever built. The fan diameter alone is over 10 feet. A fully grown adult can stand upright inside the intake, and that's exactly what Kyler did. According to security footage, at approximately 10:23 p.m., Kyler climbed into the left engine intake. Investigators believe he was attempting to retrieve something, possibly a cleaning tool that had fallen inside. Here's the problem with jet engine nacelles. They're designed to be aerodynamically smooth. There are no handholds, no footholds, no ridges to grip. Once you're inside the bell-shaped intake, the polished aluminum surface offers zero traction. Kyler couldn't climb back out. When the flight crew initiated engine start 12 minutes later, Kyler was still trapped inside. The GE90 at startup generates over 40,000 pounds of thrust. The fan blades rotate at 2,500 RPM. Did Kyler have time to realize what was happening? 3 to 5 seconds. Long enough to hear the whine of the engine spooling up. Long enough to feel the air being sucked past him. Long enough to know, with absolute certainty, that there was no escape. You'd think being trapped inside an engine is the worst way to die. The next case proves otherwise. Case 5. David Renner. January 5th, 2023. Montgomery, Alabama. Yes, the same airport where Courtney Edwards died 1 year earlier. David was a 58-year-old ground crew member who had worked at Danley Field for over 2 decades. He knew the dangers. He'd seen the aftermath of Courtney's death firsthand. And yet, on this morning, David made the same fatal mistake. But David's death was different. And to understand why, you need to understand how a jet engine actually works. Modern jet engines are called high-bypass turbofans. When air enters the intake, it's split into 2 paths. The bypass duct, the outer ring. Air flows around the engine core and exits at high speed. If a body enters this path, it's shredded by the fan blades and expelled out the back. Death is instantaneous, but recoverable. Forensic teams can identify remains. The engine core, the inner channel. Air is compressed, mixed with fuel, ignited at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and expelled. If a body enters this path, it's not shredded, it's atomized, vaporized, reduced to particulate matter. David Renner went through the bypass duct. His remains were found scattered across 200 feet of tarmac behind the aircraft. But here's what most people don't realize. Engineers designed this suction to be this powerful. Why? Because the stronger the intake, the more efficient the fuel burn. A Boeing 777 engine processes 1.5 million cubic feet of air per minute. That efficiency is why you can fly from New York to Tokyo for $800. The very thing that makes modern aviation possible is the same thing that turns humans into vapor. So far, we've talked about suction, the pull. But jet engines kill in both directions. Case 6. Gayisingh. July 2017, Princess Juliana International Airport, St. Martin. If you've seen viral videos of tourists being blown off their feet by jet blast, you've seen this airport. The runway sits just 40 feet from Maho Beach, where thrill seekers line up to feel the raw power of departing aircraft. Gayisingh was a 57-year-old tourist from New Zealand. She had traveled to St. Martin specifically to experience the jet blast. On this day, a Boeing 737 was preparing for takeoff. Here's the physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When a jet engine sucks in air at 30,000 pounds of force, it expels that air at the same force, just in the opposite direction. At full takeoff thrust, the exhaust velocity of a 737 exceeds 300 miles per hour. The jet blast extends over 200 feet behind the aircraft. Gayisingh was standing at the fence, gripping the chain link with both hands. When the pilots advanced the throttles, the blast hit her like a wall of concrete. Her grip failed. Her body was thrown backward, striking her head against the pavement. The impact fractured her skull. She died at the hospital later that day. Did Gayisingh have time to realize what was happening? About half a second. Half a second between losing her grip and her skull meeting concrete. Half a second of weightlessness before the end. Local authorities installed warning signs after her death. They read, "Jet blast can cause serious injury or death." Everything you've seen so far, the suction, the thrust, the trauma, was nothing compared to what happened to Donald Mason. Case 7. Donald Mason. January 16, 2006. El Paso, Texas. Donald was a 62-year-old baggage handler at El Paso International Airport. On this morning, he was working the ramp near a Boeing 737 that was preparing for departure. The details of what happened next remain unclear. What is known is that Donald was pulled into the left engine while it was running at 70% power. Not idle, not startup. 70%. At that power setting, the fan blades rotate at over 3,800 RPM. The suction force exceeds 50,000 pounds. Donald's body didn't go through the bypass duct. It didn't go through the core. It was atomized on contact. The phenomenon is called pink mist in aviation circles. When organic matter meets fan blades at supersonic tip speeds, cellular bonds break down at the molecular level. The body doesn't shred. It vaporizes. Forensic teams found no recoverable remains inside the engine. Did Donald have time to realize what was happening? 0. Unlike Courtney's 0.3 seconds. Unlike Ravi's full second of seeing the blades. Unlike Kyler's 3 to 5 seconds of claustrophobic terror. Donald felt nothing. His brain never registered the event. At 70% engine power, death came faster than the 150 millisecond threshold for human consciousness. The fastest death was the only mercy. So why did John Bridges survive when 6 others didn't? A $12 hard hat. That's it. Without that helmet, John would have been Donald Mason, atomized so completely that forensic teams found nothing to bury. 0 seconds, 0.3 seconds, 1 second, 3 to 5 seconds. The difference between instant death and conscious terror is measured in heartbeats. Engineers designed these engines to be this powerful. The same physics that vaporized Donald Mason lets 4.5 billion passengers fly safely every year. Jet engines weren't designed to kill. But physics doesn't negotiate. The next time you're in seat 14A, watching those engines spool up, remember the only thing separating you from these 7 people is a thin aluminum wall and the competence of strangers. Subscribe for the next story you didn't know you needed to hear.